Coming to you live from my kitchen, this is Megan with Counselor Confidential. Today we are discussing the case of 6-year-old Bre Micciolo. He unfortunately passed away on April 2nd of 2020, and right now his father, Christopher Gregor, is on trial for his... Just to get this out of the way, I am a licensed counselor, but I am not your licensed counselor, and I'm also not treating or have even met any of the people that I'll be discussing today. Everything we're talking about today is just my opinion as a human, not in a professional capacity. I am just coming to you with my thoughts on this case. Everything that we are saying is alleged because this man, Christopher Gregor, is still on trial and innocent until proven guilty. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to this case. So like I said, Bre was a 6-year-old boy, and he was born to a single mother. She was 17 at the time. Her name is Bre Micciolo. And at the time of Bre's birth, according to Bre, she did inform Christopher of Bre's birth, and he was aware that he had a son the entire time that Bre was alive. I know if you have only been following the court case that is a little fuzzy and that it sounds like Christopher didn't know he had a son until all of a sudden he popped up at 4 or 5 years old, but the truth is he was aware as far as Bre claims. Now, where I'm getting a lot of this information is from a video that Bre herself posted on her own YouTube channel about 2 years ago. I will link it in the description below if you want to see it, but hopefully if you are interested in getting more information, you will check that out because it gives a lot of insight that we have not heard yet in the actual testimony in this case. So Bre says that she did inform Christopher of Bre's birth, but that Christopher did not want anything to do with Bre, and Bre was okay with that because she didn't really like him or trust him anyway. She also reports that when she met Christopher, she was only 16 years old and he was 21, and that the encounter that they had was not consensual. That is Bre's own words. Again, that was not said directly in court during her testimony, but I do think it was implied because the prosecutor, not her attorney, but the prosecutor basically introduced the scenario by asking Bre how old she was when she gave birth to Bre and what grade she was in. That I think was very strategic on the prosecutor's part because it shows that this was an underage minor who was still in high school who was giving birth to a child. Moving on. So Bre and Bre were living with Bre's mother. They may have been living with some other family members as well, I'm not sure, but at least with her mother. And for a while, things were going okay. Now, there has been a lot of talk that Bre was on drugs or was an addict of some sort. I personally have not done any digging into that information, but it seems to be widely understood to be true, and that would make sense then why eventually Christopher got custody. So that is just part of the story, but it seems that once Christopher entered the picture, which we'll get to in a second, that Bre was clean and sober and continues to be until this time, which is current day May of 2024 as this trial is happening. So how did Christopher become involved and how did we end up with an unalive child? That is what we're here to talk about today. At some point, Bre decided that she needed to be on government support. She needed financial assistance. Unfortunately, in almost every state, when an individual applies for government assistance, and if they happen to have children, the state will want to know if there is another parent who might be able to provide child support. In Bre's case, she states, again in that video that's linked below, she stated that she was not aware that that was a requirement when she initially went to apply for government assistance. She did not know that that would mean that Christopher was going to get involved. She had not sought any child support from him prior to that because she did not want anything to do with him, and he had not wanted anything to do with Corey, and they just were not really in communication in any meaningful way. So once the ball started rolling with that, with the government assistance application, that is when Christopher Gregor and his family got involved. From how Bre explains it in the interview that I linked below, it sounds like at first Christopher was willing to just pay the child support, but that he still really didn't want a lot to do with Corey. But that over time he did want more contact, and it sounds like his parents, so Corey's paternal grandparents, wanted to have more contact with Corey. So that's when sort of visitation started. At some point, at the urging of we don't know who, possibly if it was just my conjecture, my thought, my assumption, it sounds like Christopher's parents probably wanted more visitation. And it also sounds like Christopher probably didn't want to be paying so much in child support. So at someone's urging, Christopher applies for full custody. And because of Bre's alleged past with addiction, Christopher and his parents had Corey now in full custody. I believe legally it was just Christopher having full custody, but at the time, based on what I understand from the trial and the testimony, Corey was moved out of his mother's home, the only home he'd ever known, and into his paternal grandparents' home, where his grandparents, his biological father, and his father's sister were all living. There might have been one more sibling of Christopher. I think there was a brother maybe as well. Anyway, that's where Corey was moved into. And then he only had visitation with his mom, Bre. That must have been a huge, huge shakeup for everyone involved, especially Corey, who had no say in any of this. Now, according to Bre, as soon as Corey was out of her custody, she started noticing bruises, scrapes, bloody lips, things like that on Corey every time he would come back and visit her. She said that she reported over 100 times to the Department of Child and Family Services that Corey was being hurt by his father. She said that it was almost never taken seriously at any point, and that is how we ended up with Corey no longer being with us. So what exactly happened? Well, at this point, we still don't know. We still don't know. We are in the tail end of Christopher Gregor's trial right now. We have had all of these witnesses called. The state has actually rested as of this past week, and the only thing left is for the defense to call a couple of more witnesses on their end, and for the state and the defense to give their closing arguments. I am curious to see if Christopher will go on the stand himself. I don't think it would be a great idea for him. He is not a very likable character, and I am about to explain why. If you're not familiar with this case, the biggest piece besides the actual end of Corey's life is a video of Corey being forced to run on a treadmill at his father's apartment complex. So to get to that point, I have to explain how he got from his grandparents' house to this apartment. So it sounds like while Corey was living in the home with all of the people in his paternal family, he was mostly protected, and his grandparents were the ones who were spending most of the time with Corey, helping him with his schoolwork, helping him with just all of the things that he needed. But at some point, Christopher wanted to move into his own apartment and be more independent. At this time, he was, I think, working on his master's degree and working in an underprivileged school as a teacher. And so that was what was going on in Christopher's world. So he wanted to be more independent. He wanted his own space away from his family for whatever reasons. We don't know. We can only speculate. And so he ended up getting his own apartment, and he then had Corey all by himself when Corey was at his residence. So there were no other adults present. So while this was happening, there was an event where Bre was bringing Corey back to Christopher's apartment for his custody time, and Bre was running late. She was stuck in traffic, she was running late, and she called Christopher and explained to him what was going on, and he apparently, allegedly, was very upset about this. He was grumpy. I guess he had a date later that night. I'm not really sure what all of the details were, but he was very upset and angry at Bre and threatening her and saying, okay, well, for every minute that you're late, we're gonna knock that time off of your visitation when Corey goes back to you. So that was that scenario. So he's already heated by the time, I think another hour or so passed, maybe 2 hours between the time that she let him know that and when Corey actually arrived at Christopher's apartment. So they arrive, and Christopher says, just drop him off at the community center at the gym in my apartment complex. And I'll, the clubhouse, I guess, with the gym. Just drop him off there. Don't come in. I'll just take him from there. So that's what Bre does. Drops her son off at the apartment complex's clubhouse/gym. So Christopher's there. Corey comes in. And then what unfolds from that point is too horrific to discuss in great detail. There is video footage. I personally have not been able to watch the entire video from start to finish because it is too painful for me. Corey's own grandparents have also stated that they have not watched the video because they don't want to see him being mistreated by their son. And in the 2022 interview that I saw with Bre on her channel, again, linked below, she also said at that time that she had not watched the video either because it was too painful and that's not how she wanted to remember her son. But all of that to say, that's where Corey was. There is video evidence of Corey being told he was too fat and that he needed to run to lose weight at 6 years old. And Christopher started increasing the speed on this treadmill over a period of time and forcing Corey, a 6-year-old, to run as fast as he could until he would stumble and fall multiple times. And each time he fell, the treadmill is going very, very fast. The speed is faster than what many adults could probably even run. And he's falling, he's getting rug burn or treadmill burn, I guess, on his forehead. He's getting bruised on his chest and torso. And each time he falls, his father is allegedly berating him and picking him up by the back of his shirt and forcing him to continue to try and run. At one point, and this is a part I have not personally watched, but at one point, I guess, he also bit Corey's head while this was happening. So this is documented, and this is one of the charges in this current court case of child mistreatment, we'll say. I'm not saying the words because of the YouTube rules and regulations, but you understand what I'm talking about. So that is an incident that happened because Christopher was upset with Bre and he's taking it out on Corey. Who knows what else occurred and what has happened to this poor child when there were no security cameras or surveillance cameras. we can only imagine, and I try not to because I'm sure it's even worse. But that was in March of 2020, and Corey passed away on April 2nd of 2020. So this was in late March. After this incident, Corey's teacher, his first grade teacher, noticed the rug burn on Corey's forehead, and also that he was acting a little different. And so she questioned him about it, and she ended up reporting what she saw to the family services people. I'm not sure what came of that, because obviously Corey was still allowed to be in his father's care following that situation. So that was unfortunate, to say the least. Corey's mother also noticed that Corey was different and that he had an abrasion on his forehead and that he had bruises on his body. And she also reported this. That was one of her over 100 reports. And nothing was done. As this all continued to go on, I'm not sure if there was another incident closer. It sounds like, I'm a little fuzzy on the timeline, but that was the end of March. And it sounds like the closer we're getting to April, I don't know if there was another incident that created more bruising or what exactly happened, if it was just a result of this treadmill incident, but there was enough bruising and things going on with poor little Corey that his mother felt it was necessary to take him to Corey's pediatrician. Corey's pediatrician did an exam and said, I think that this is something that needs to be seen. This is a situation that needs to be taken care of at the emergency department at the hospital, because they are more equipped to do these full assessments for child mistreatment. So Corey's mom took him to the emergency department, and he got a full exam, a full everything there. And the hospital did again report this to the Department of Child and Family Services, or whatever they call it in New Jersey. That's what we call it here in Illinois. So these are documented incidents that have occurred. This is documented suspicion of mistreatment. At this point, Corey's mom, Bre, goes to a judge and says, please do not make me send my child back to this guy who is clearly hurting our child. And the judge, for whatever reason, did not grant the emergency order that she was requesting for full custody. Whoever, this is an aside, this is my opinion, whoever that judge is should absolutely be investigated. And whoever was taking all of these reports and looking at the repetitive reports by multiple people, not just Corey's mom, but the teacher, the doctor, the emergency department, whoever these people are, this needs to be addressed, because there is a child who ultimately is no longer with us because nobody listened and nobody stepped in to help this child. But we'll get back to the story. After this emergency request for full custody was denied to Bre, she had no choice but to drop her son off on the morning of April 2nd, 2020, to Christopher's apartment. She dropped him off at 9 o'clock in the morning, and between 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 p.m. that day, something happened to Corey. None of us know exactly what happened, and I'm sure it would break our hearts if we knew. But whatever happened to Corey ultimately led to him no longer being with us, because at 5 p.m. on April 2nd of 2020, he took his last breath. And his family was not with him. because his biological father, Christopher, as soon as he was informed that this is what was happening to Corey, he left. He left the hospital and he drove from New Jersey to Tennessee. And who knows how far he would have gone if he hadn't been stopped by police. So he left, and he also, in his last act of control over Bre, told the nurses that they were not to contact Corey's mother, that she was an addict, that she was worthless, and that she didn't need to be informed of Corey's illness or his death. So Bre wasn't able to be at the hospital because Christopher wouldn't tell her which hospital or where. He wouldn't allow the hospital staff to contact her. So she was not aware. She said in this video that I linked below that she was informed of her child's passing by a police officer showing up at her door. I cannot imagine the anguish and anger that I would feel if I had been fighting so hard to protect my child, only to be told that he had been alone when he passed. So Christopher took off, drove out of state, wouldn't answer his phone, was Googling, can I be tracked if I turn my phone on airplane mode? So he knew what he was doing, that he was fleeing, allegedly. We're still not done. The jury has still not given their final verdict, but this is my opinion. And he's fleeing. Corey's mother is devastated. The whole family is devastated. And it took, sounds like from Bre's interview, that it took over 2 years to get Corey's death certificate to accurately reflect how he passed away, and that it was not undetermined, but in fact, homicide. So that brings us now to present day. Where we are in the trial right now is that, like I said, all of the prosecution's witnesses have been talked to, have testified, and some of the defense's witnesses have also been on the stand and have testified. And now we are waiting for the defense to bring their final witnesses onto the stand and for them to be, for them to testify, be cross-examined, all of that. And then hopefully by the end of this coming week, we will have a verdict. There's a couple things to talk about commentary-wise. Number one, will Christopher Gregor take the stand? That is a great question. Christopher Gregor seems like he is just narcissistic enough that he might. I really think he might. He seems like the kind of guy who thinks he knows better than everybody else, thinks that he, is able to charm people or convince people of things. And I think he very well could testify. Now, I don't think it's a great idea. I don't think he is very likable. Even his own attorney said in his opening statement that Christopher Gregor is not a likable person in light of seeing this treadmill video that the jurors were inevitably going to see and now have seen. So everyone is aware that, based on this hard piece of evidence, he is not a likable guy. So I can't imagine that anything he's going to say in his own defense is going to further his cause in defending himself or convincing the jury that he was not the reason that Corey is no longer alive. But for my own selfish reasons, I think it would be very interesting if he did choose to testify. I think it would be fascinating to hear his side, because up until now, he's been just completely silent. We haven't heard anything from him. I honestly don't even know exactly when he finally got arrested or how all of this came to be. So I haven't seen any statements from him, so I'd love to hear his take on this, even though I'm sure, again, my opinion, allegedly, I think it would all be lies and cover up. The other question that is still open and lingering, I guess, if you are on the jury, is did Corey pass away from blunt force trauma, which is what the forensic experts on the prosecution side have testified to. I think they testified very believably, and I accept their explanation of how Corey passed. Or the defense is trying to suggest that Corey had sepsis, that he passed away from sepsis. From what kind of illness, we don't know. But that is their attempt at introducing reasonable doubt into this case to protect Christopher Gregor. I'm not a medical expert. I did, however, spend the last 3 years working in a hospital as a hospital social worker. So again, not a medical expert, but I have been around a lot of people in and out of the hospital. And also I've worked in nursing homes and assisted living facilities with older adults for many years in my career. So I've seen sepsis in action. I've seen how it works in adults anyway. And usually sepsis is something, yes, it can come on suddenly, right? The actual sepsis piece can be very dangerous, very fast, overnight, within a few hours. But typically there is some sort of infection that has been going on for a period of time prior to sepsis. It's not something that just appears out of thin air. It's something that there has been a preceding illness. And so from the testimony we've seen so far, I am convinced that there was no, pneumonia, there was no infection, there was nothing really that would have caused sepsis. And there was no indication of any sort of infection in any of the clinical records from the pediatrician that saw Corey, I think a day or two before he passed, from the ER visit the day or two before he passed, or even in the hospital records from the actual day that he passed away. That none of that mentions sepsis, none of that mentions any sort of illness or infection, as far as I know. This is just from the court proceedings that I've witnessed so far. If anyone else has seen anything different, please let me know in the comments below. But as far as I understand, I have not seen any evidence of that. But that is what the defense is going to try and present this coming week, as far as I know. So I'll be interested to see what their expert says, how they plan on introducing that, especially if there are no medical records indicating that. Maybe they found some, I don't know, but the witnesses prior, the expert witnesses, like the infectious disease witness that was on the stand late last week, they didn't see anything in any of the records or in the autopsy results that would have indicated sepsis as a cause of, So those are the to be determined, the mysteries that are coming up this week. How is that going to be explained? How is sepsis going to be introduced as a cause? And is Christopher Gregor going to testify? The other piece that I am really interested in this week is, what is the jury going to say? I'm pretty confident it is not going to take a very long time for this jury to deliberate. There are two major charges that Christopher Gregor is facing right now. The first one is the child mistreatment. I know it's worded differently legally, but that's how I'm going to say it. That one, I think, is a slam dunk. He allegedly, in my opinion, I think the jury will come back and say guilty. I don't know how they couldn't. That is unquestionable. There is video evidence. There it is. in black and white, well, actually in color, but right in front of your eyes on the screen. They had to watch it. It happened. There are multiple records of people seeing the aftermath of that, including bruises, scrapes, rash, all of that, okay? So that, I think, is easy. I don't think they're gonna deliberate on that more than a couple of minutes. I think that's a slam dunk. The other charge is the big M word, and whether Christopher Gregor's actions directly caused his son, Corey, to no longer be living. Again, I mean, obviously I'm not on the jury. Clearly, I have had access to lots of commentary. I have an interest in this case, so I've been able to watch, videos about it and read up and read articles on it and things like that. So with all of that information, I personally, I don't have a reasonable doubt as to how this child passed away. I don't. I think it's pretty clear there was a lot leading up to whatever happened to Corey on that day, on April 2nd, when he finally left this earth. He was fine when he arrived at 9 a.m. He was no longer fine when he arrived at the hospital around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Something happened in that time, and his mother knew something was going to happen because she was scared for her son and was asking the courts to please not make him go to that man's house anymore. And yet he still had to. The court denied her request, and here we are today. If I were on the jury, I don't think it would take me very long. I don't think it would take me very long to come to a conclusion. I know it all seems to be, circumstantial evidence. I don't know that, unfortunately there's not anything as strong as a video proving what happened. But children that age don't just pass away like that. There has to be an incident that occurs. And he was only in Christopher Gregor's care for that time. There was a history of mistreatment. There was a history of physical mistreatment. There was a history of retaliatory behavior against Corey's mom, Bre. And I'm sure if Christopher was aware of Bre's accusations and her request for an emergency order for custody, I'm sure he wasn't too happy that day. I'm sure he was very disgruntled. Allegedly. Obviously, I don't know him, but allegedly, this is my opinion. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see hopefully this week. I don't know exactly what the court schedule is. I thought they were supposed to be back in court on Friday. I'm looking at my calendar, on the 24th, but I saw no coverage on Friday. Today is Sunday, the 26th. Monday, the 27th is a national holiday, Memorial Day. So my hope is that on Tuesday, the 28th, we will get back in court, get the defense witnesses back on the stand, get moving with that, see if Christopher himself gets on the stand, and hopefully we'll have a decision by the end of the week. Stay tuned. I'm going to keep covering this case. If there are other cases of interest to you and you're watching this video, please let me know in the comments below. This is a brand new channel. I have another channel called Millennial Meg that is all about my life and decluttering and cleaning, but this channel, Counselor Confidential, is all about just talking about today's headlines, talking about true crime, talking about justice for children and women and other victims of crime. And I'm just so excited to get started with this channel and welcome you and talk about things that are interesting to me. So join me, subscribe if you want to see more. We'll see you in the next one.